this is an element that has been woven into American society since they had to take back what they said in the direct Declaration of Independence to write the Constitution, which is terror of democracy. Absolute terror that the majority of people who do not benefit from the system will realize that, and they will have their way with the minority, which has been exploited.
You have to have various controls in place to deal with that. Electoral controls, mediating institutions.
Yeah. All of these
control
things,
the masses.
All this artifice to make sure that people continue to behave themselves in such a way that allows them to be exploited.
You tear down the house, then you put up the rent. You pocket the cash, and you crush all dissent. You pour all the water.
Welcome to the Red Diaper Pail, episode 14. Today is Monday, December 22nd. This is a podcast about art, culture, history, politics, technology, and parenting from a left perspective. I am Simone.
And I am John Paul.
And it is the first day of winter break for the kids. John Paul is a year older.
I am.
And
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Are you excited?
Am I excited? Yes. How does it feel to be older?
Terrible. I've hit the age where every birthday is a small tragedy instead of something that you're excited for.
You know what my mom would say?
What would your mom say?
The alternative is worse.
Well, we'll see. We'll wait till the end of horrible headlines and then decide if that's true.
You had good barbecue for your birthday?
I did. For once.
Okay.
All
right. Well, the other thing is, if it sounds like we're rushing, one of the twins is waking up every 40 minutes.
Yeah. What the fuck?
Including at bedtime. And his twin did this 3 weeks ago, so I guess he's just 3 weeks behind. But it does make me feel like I have to rush through everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, right.
Don't listen to this one on 1.25 speed, because we are already on 1.25 speed.
Oh, God. All right, anyway, so you have the horrible headlines this time.
I do. So it's terrible in Gaza, and it's the winter season, so it's rainy and cold. And they're still not letting enough aid in, and a lot of the aid would be like building materials, because people are in tents that are maybe appropriate in the summer. But this is a story from the Drop Site News that was covering waste in Gaza. So the headline is, Garbage is Poisoning Gaza. With Israel controlling and blocking access to all of Gaza's landfills, nearly 900,000 tons of solid waste has been dumped across the enclave since October 2023. Waste collection systems and vehicles have been largely destroyed, forcing garbage to pile up. UN agencies warn that winter rains and flooding are spreading toxic waste and contaminating all water sources. Gaza City alone is now buried under an estimated 350,000 tons of garbage.
Oh, my fucking God.
Yeah. What's happening there right now is there's no physical infrastructure. There's no buildings. So people are in tents, and it's downpouring rain, and it's cold.
Yeah.
But, there's no infrastructure, period. It's not like, they're just in tents. There's nothing. There's no sewage system that works. There's no water system that works. There's no roads. There's no access to landfills.
Yeah.
They're in just mud and shit.
People are dying of hypothermia.
The disease risk going into the winter is extremely high. And they're not, by Israel's own numbers, they are coming in under the number of trucks they're supposed to let in daily. Yeah. That's Israel's assessment of the numbers.
And they're not letting anything in that's building materials, because their claim is the kinds of, the metal supports for a nice tent that could withstand the cold. Those can be used as weapons. So they're not letting any of that stuff in. Yeah,
it's sick. It's horrible.
They know what they're doing. I mean, this is all intentional. It's still going on. They did it. They killed a guy, an attack of opportunity, some Hamas leader, and they're supposed to be a ceasefire, and they just took him out because they saw him and they had a chance to do it. They barely tried to say that it was in response to blah blah blah, something at the border, blah blah blah. So bad that the White House got pissed at them. They're just continuing. This is a genocide that's continuing.
Yes.
It's just now back to a low burn genocide.
Well, it gets it out of the news. It got it out of the news cycle. It toned down the outrage. So going to the United States, Turning Point USA had their conference this week. There's been a lot of fun headlines out of that, including Nicki Minaj and Erica Kirk having a sit down. But the big one was the infighting amongst the speakers. Ben Shapiro said the conservative movement is in serious danger from charlatans who claim to speak in the name of principle and actually traffic in conspiracism and dishonesty. He called Bannon a PR flack for Jeffrey Epstein. Tucker Carlson
basically laughed it off. He said it's ridiculous,
but he did.
I hate the way that he laughs. He has this forced laugh he does that's tactical, and it makes my skin crawl.
I know that's exactly what you're talking about.
I watched it. I laughed. That kind of bitter, sardonic laugh that emerges from you when, like, Upside Down World arrives. When your dog starts doing your taxes and you're like, wait, it's not supposed to work this way. To hear calls for, like, deplatforming and denouncing people at a Charlie Kirk event, I'm like, what? This is hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, so Shapiro opened and then in his opening went after a bunch of people. I think J.D. Vance closed because I guess he's the
vice president of the United States is a big get. I mean, it used to be. Anyway,
I think he's the golden child of the Turning Point USA group. He
let us know that you don't have to apologize for being white anymore, which is a big relief to me because the amount of time I spend every day apologizing for being white was getting in the way of all the other things I want to do. So I thank you, J.D. Vance, for rescuing me from that obligation.
He also very notably decided that he did not have to say anything about. I guess it was notably absent that he did not condemn anti-Semitism or
he didn't take a side,
make any point about like whether or not they're white supremacists.
Yeah, his opinion is, I'm going to wait to see which side wins, and I'll take that side. The split between Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, if you want to say them as a figurehead, is basically they're having a debate, which is do Jews get to count as part of the nation? And I think that people like Candace Owens have gone way out on the periphery of saying absolutely not. She was telling her audience that Jews were actually the ones responsible for slavery, not white men, that black people in general should have a problem with Jews and not white men because they're the real architects of slavery. And then there's the Fuentes thing, which is basically another version of the same thing, except for he hates black people too. Candace Owens, I guess, believes irrationally that if she's part of a Christian tradition, then these same people won't eventually come for black people in the movement, which is, I don't know how you could, maybe she just doesn't care. I guess that's one version of it. But
learn the true history of slavery, because that wasn't exactly a white men sport, okay? Jewish people were the ones that were trading us. Jewish people were in control of the slave trade. They've buried a lot of it, but it's there.
Ben Shapiro called her a fraud and a grifter on stage.
Ben Shapiro, the idea that the movement might accidentally become something that's based upon this type of thing.
Anti-Semitism?
Yeah, and Vivek Ramaswamy wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, which is another version of the same thing, is like, I get to be American too. It's a values thing. It's not an inheritance. Donald Trump's entry into politics was questioning Obama's birthplace because he was black.
Yeah.
With no evidence whatsoever. That's a conspiracy, a race-based conspiracy.
It's good enough for the state of Hawaii and the State Department.
Okay.
U.S. State Department recognizes these as legitimately...
It's not a birth certificate, Candy, and people are trying to figure out why isn't he giving his birth certificate. It's not a birth certificate. A certificate of live birth, and you can see that one that you have and the one that I brought you, because that's the one that's on the internet and all over the place. It doesn't even have a serial number. It doesn't have a signature. It doesn't have a signature. One that I saw on television has a stamp, but that's not a signature.
Right, but that's how they
Excuse me, but that's not the one that they were showing to everybody. And I just say very simply, why doesn't he show his birth certificate? Why has he spent over $2 million in legal fees to keep this quiet and to keep this silent? When I listened today to the tape of the grandmother, and she was saying he was born essentially in Kenya, and then all of a sudden, don't forget, this is when Barack Obama was hot as a pistol because it looked like he was going to get the nomination, and they had a lot of people and a lot of handlers in there, and all of a sudden you hear people all over the room, no, he was born in Hawaii, he was born in Hawaii. But she didn't say that.
It was a misinterpretation.
They drowned her out. She was like, there were a lot of people in that room, and she said Kenya, he was born right here, and then they started saying, screaming, no, you mean Hawaii, you mean Hawaii.
Ben Shapiro liked that one.
I mean, Ben Shapiro.
You know, he was an anti-Trumper back
He
then.
was an anti-Trumper. But all these people, like, this is the train you're on. Either be against it or be for it. But don't, like, that is what it is. Like, this is what you bought. This is the ticket you bought.
A lot of these people, they're on the train, and then it goes too far, and they get panicked. But you're right. It's like, that's what you opt for. Also, the other big news, of course, is that the Erica Kirk announced that this was the beginning of getting J.D. Vance elected for 2028. She said, "We are going to get my husband's friend, J.D. Vance, elected."
Good luck with that.
In the most resounding way possible.
Good luck with that.
So that's Turning Point USA's
Americafest.
Speaking of Americafest, the Epstein files. We got another like drip, drip, drop of some more photos.
Yeah.
And a lot of redacted text.
Yeah, I thought they weren't there, so they legally were bound to release this stuff, and I thought they weren't going to blow by it. But they just redacted everything, so.
I mean, we got a couple more Bill Gates photos. We got a Sergey Brin photo.
Yeah, this is hilarious. I don't mean to scandalize the listener, but we recorded the artifact before now. And I picked David Brooks' most recent op-ed in The Atlantic, only to find out that David Brooks is in the pit photos. And that's particularly hilarious because a month ago he wrote an article about how he doesn't buy the whole Epstein conspiracy thing. He thinks it's a little trumped up and we should probably pay attention to something fucking asshole.
As you'll find in the artifact, a lot of what David Brooks has to say is about the sort of particular morality of the neocons and how much we need to return to that, which will be especially sweet for you all listening post Epstein drop.
Yeah. The crux of that article is that the neocon movement was an attempt to socially engineer values that none of them believed in themselves, but felt it was necessary to push on the general population in order to meet their own ends. And this is a guy who's apparently he's seeing the morality of the ruling class. They have absolutely, and he has absolutely nothing to say about that. The entire article is how do we get the rabble to behave themselves like they used to?
In that case, perhaps it's not that hypocritical because he's not actually looking to police his own morals or police the ruling class morals, which he clearly has a clear picture of, which is parties at Epstein mansions. He just wants to make sure the workers show up to work on time. Yeah. But anyways, let's not blow the artifact.
Sorry.
We want people to listen to the artifact.
Yeah, please listen to the artifact.
So yeah, David Brooks. But yeah, the big news is that they're just redacting everything.
This is my theory. Obviously, I don't have any new evidence that you don't have. But the question about whether this was an intentional blackmail ring, I think is silly at this point. I think it's fairly obviously that's what it was. The level of documentation of this motherfucker is crazy. There's some debate about whether it's like the U.S. or Mossad, which is a silly argument, I think, because it's like, is it the major baseball team or is it one of their farm teams? Like, they're on the same side. They don't have exactly the same interests, but for all intents and purposes, they easily could be using him together. So my theory is wasn't just a blackmail ring, and I did think they had photographs of all of these people. But in addition to being a blackmail ring, it was an initiation ritual. It was like you can be part of the upper echelon, but you have to do this. You have to let us document you doing this because that is how we'll have leverage and will also serve a sense of mutually assured destruction. Like, there is no way to keep us from destroying one another completely because all of the sort of traditional expected mores in politics of like you go but you don't go this far had disintegrated, and I think that they use this as a substitute for that. Is the CIA needs to have a certain level of control to manage the world, and then we need a certain level of control over each other to manage the world. My other theory is that Democrats dropped the first 3 emails right after they lost the government shutdown. And I think they were using that as their leverage. I think they thought they would win the shutdown fight because I think they thought Trump would not want to revisit the Epstein story. And I think he looked at it and he said, I'm winning this because I don't care the harm that happens to people or to the economy, really, because I'll win this at all costs. And I think that the Democrats' bosses were very unhappy with the damage that the shutdown was doing to the economy. So that even though they were winning in public opinion, they were eventually going to lose because Trump was much more willing to endure and had much more political support to endure the fallout than they did. So I think they were relying on these emails, and I think he said, I don't care about those. So I don't think it's an accident they came out like very soon after that. This whole thing, I think, was like sort of revealed the hand a little bit here, which is they had all this stuff all along. Everyone knew it. This was supposed to be what was maintaining the boundaries of politics.
Yep. Well, we'll see what they release next.
Yeah, I mean, will they be able to force a non-redaction? Do you get a judge in there with the non-redacted versions to confirm whether it's national security?
No, I don't think they're going to get anything. I don't think we're going to get anything good out of this.
You think it's a dead end? I mean, why were they basically chased Marjorie Taylor Greene out of the party because she wouldn't agree that the whole thing was a hoax.
Punitive,
but why do they care so much? Why don't they just release the redacted things months and months ago?
I don't think that this is their preferred outcome, but I think that this is...
They'll accept this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Learn the definition of limited hangout.
Bari Weiss, the CBS News editor-in-chief, killed a 60-minute segment on the CCOT, which is the prison in El Salvador that the United States sent immigrants to.
Mm-hmm.
The segment was screened 5 times and was cleared by the CBS lawyers. It had been promoted publicly on Friday.
Oh, my God.
Saturday morning, she raised concerns and killed it. Sunday, 3 hours before airtime, CBS announced a delay. The segment featured interviews with deportees describing torture and sexual abuse at this maximum security prison in El Salvador. She says that the story wasn't ready. It did not advance the ball. Quote, what the fuck does that mean?
What the fuck does that mean?
She wanted on-camera interviews with Stephen Miller or other top Trump officials. She objected to calling them Venezuelan migrants rather than illegal immigrants, even though many were asylum seekers and were not, in fact, illegal immigrants. And she let them know what Stephen Miller's phone number was so the team could get in touch with him, get him on camera.
Oh, thank God she's there. They can find his number.
She really is.
She's so well connected. This news organization, they had no idea how to get in touch with him.
All value add. All value add. This is like, what it's like to have a stupid boss. But she killed the segment, and it did not air.
This is on the...
They had fully promoted it.
Yeah. This is on the heels of a disastrous town hall she did with Erica Kerr that no one watched, and they couldn't even get...
It was so cringy, the clips I saw.
Yeah, it was awful. And they couldn't get sponsors for it. So they had to put it on like a time where they usually don't get viewers anyway because they couldn't get anyone to put commercials in it. Awful. I mean, I have to admit this is further right than I thought she was steering the network. I thought she was going to do like a corporate Democrat
definitely like signaling that. I really don't think that that's the read.
Yeah, she seems to be absolutely willing to do whatever she's told to do by extremely wealthy and powerful Trump-aligned billionaires. This is what this is. I mean, she basically was like, this is going to make the administration look bad, and I'm going to get in trouble. So no, you can't do it.
Yeah, or she just maybe she likes to be friendly. I mean, maybe it's like is she afraid of being in trouble? Yes, and Ellison is her boss, so he is not. I mean, he's a Trump guy, but I also think that she might just find that she's perfectly comfortable cozying up with him.
Yeah, I mean, she made her whole career on basically being able to tell them what they wanted to hear.
Right, and so if the goalpost moves right, she's so interested.
But the goalpost,
she's so interested in advancing the ball.
Not being able to have a conversation about mass deportation is not in the the political. No, that's just what we do now.
Yeah. All right,
Howard. If you work at 60 Minutes, leak it, please. Let's just leak it. Just put it up on YouTube. It's not that hard.
I mean, it got screened internally 5 times. You can't tell me there's not like at least 2 or 3 dozen people that have like the Vimeo link and the password. But whatever. Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy
horrible headline holidays. I hope you enjoyed the David Brooks sermon. the artifact this week?
All right, yes. I have a column by David Brooks. He and a lot of the other neocons sort of crawled under a rock after they got revealed for what they were, which was completely out of touch with reality because of the Iraq War. But he's back. They're back.
Well, he never left.
Oh, yeah, never let. No one pays any professional consequences for being wrong about everything, which Brooks is just one example of being absolutely wrong about everything. This article is in The Atlantic, which is, of course, a magazine helmed by former Israeli prison guard Jeffrey Goldberg, who has also similarly been wrong about everything and yet does not go away. So, anyway, speaking of neocons, this is called The Neocons Were Right. Not about Iraq, but the moral tenor of their political writings could be an antidote to Trumpism by David Brooks. And David Brooks is offended by Donald Trump, not because he disagrees with Trump on any major policy issue, but because he makes people like David Brooks look ridiculous and hateful and crude and uncivilized and etc. So, okay, here we go. Ready? What comes after Donald Trump? What compelling social vision can replace MAGA's offerings and reverse the tide of global populism? In considering these questions, I completely ignored the existence of Zoran Mamdani. No, I'm just kidding. I find myself returning to an unlikely group of 20th century thinkers, the neoconservatives. These days, when people heard the word neocons, they tend to think of Republicans who supported the Iraq War. But the notoriety the neocons attained for supporting that war has obscured their origins as a dissident faction within the American left, one that was staunchly anti-communist, but mostly preoccupied with domestic policy. Here's why the original neocon thinkers, such as Irving Kristol, James Q. Wilson, Jean Kirkpatrick, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, can be so helpful right now. They focus their attention on the bloody crossroads where morality and politics intersect. They saw politics through the lens of not only polling and social science data, but also literature, philosophy, psychology, and theology. They ask the big questions, not just how can we win the next election, but how can we create a civilization to be proud of? The moral and spiritual tenor of their political writings can be a tonic for a society in moral and spiritual crisis. A moral and spiritual crisis that's almost completely a consequence of neocons getting their way in the aughts. But neoconservatism coalesced into a movement in the 1970s, but it has its roots in the cafeteria of the City College of New York in the late 1930s. The core immigrant kids who would go on to found the movement were the Trotskyists who sat in one alcove of that dining hall. They spent their days arguing with one another and with the Stalinists who sat in the neighboring alcove. In those days, Kristol, Irving Howe, Seymour Martin Lipset, Nathan Glazer, and others were convinced that communism was the future, and so it mattered what kind prevailed.
I mean, this is not a new story people tell about the neocons.
I don't know if most people know about this, but yeah, a lot of these people were very fervent Trotskyites who reformed themselves into American conservatives, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
They became staunchly anti-communist.
I already said they were Trotskyites. You know to say they're.
He said they were the dissident faction within the American left, which is kind of misleading because, like, the originals, I guess, the originals were Trotskyists, not neocons, but the originals were on the left. But by the time they got to be neocons in the 70s, they weren't dissidents in the American left. They were fully in the American right, trying to destroy the American left.
Yeah, it's a classic David Brooks sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Where he's gonna, the bad things are actually left stuff, and the good stuff is actually the right wing stuff.
Yeah.
The neoconservatives all broke with Marxism during the Stalin era, and most of them became Franklin D. Roosevelt-style Democrats. Kristol fought the Nazis in Europe and realized that if communism ever came to America, it would turn into a massively corrupt criminal enterprise, which is what eventually happened in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, fighting the Nazis taught him that.
Yeah.
I'm over here fighting these Nazis, and what I really am learning, that's David Brooks hoping there's some percentage of his readers who think the Nazis and the communists are the same people. He won't say it, but he'll like put those two sentences together because, no biggie if you do.
Yeah, he learned how bad communism is because 30 million communists died beating Hitler. So how could you possibly respect that? After the war, many of the neocons went on to become social scientists at places like Harvard, Princeton, and UC Berkeley. Others became journalists or editors of magazines such as Commentary and Encounter. Their second big shift occurred during the 1960s and 70s. Glazer went to work for the Kennedy administration at the Housing and Home Finance Agency, the predecessor to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. In 1965, Crystal and Danielle Bell founded a magazine called The Public Interest. Swept up in the intoxicating social science confidence of the era, they believed that we now had the knowledge to settle old ideological feuds and solve social problems scientifically. What? Wasn't that the whole point of like modernity, starting with Freud, was we're going to start solving these things scientifically?
Yeah, also a lot of Marxist stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think this is a new piece of information. There was I think, what he's saying, 60s and 70s, there was a boon of like social scientists and like policy production that happened around like social welfare in the United States. Like, but I don't think it was like, and I don't think he captured what was new about that in that sentence.
Yeah. I mean, any Trotskyist would be very familiar with Lenin, and any Leninist will tell you that the scientific approach to solving problems is like fundamental to the viewpoint. So this is all stuff they brought in, I guess.
I think this is mostly him setting up this thing where he's going to say the good ones were like trying to solve social problems, domestic social problems, and the bad ones were the hawkish on Iraq. But he'd like to return to like the good one. I think he's trying to create a completely false category because they were all
a false dichotomy. Okay.
But he's like trying to set up some elaborate explanation of these social scientists trying to solve problems.
Supposedly the explanation for that would be that some of them got so obsessed with Israel that they couldn't see straight. But all of them are obsessed with Israel, aren't they?
Are you saying about being hawkish?
Hawkish in Iraq was hawkish in whatever was good for Israel at the time.
I don't know the history of the neocons in Israel.
Let's find out, shall we? Quote, "Men are learning how to make an industrial economy work," Moynihan wrote in the magazine's first issue in 1965. Okay.
Well, Moynihan, is this the Moynihan? It is. It's the Moynihan of the Moynihan Report.
It is. Moynihan, people might know the Moynihan Report, which was a treatise. Official title was
The Negro Family, The Case for National Action.
Indeed. And in this, he basically says
that...
in
1965.
Yeah. So this is 1965, 1 year after the Civil Rights Act. So Moynihan is looking at America, seeing that Black people are not doing very well.
Yeah.
1 year after Jim Crow is still a real thing. The Civil Rights Act has just been passed.
Yeah.
And he concludes that the reason why Black people are struggling is the Black family is disintegrated. There's too many children being born out of wedlock. There's too many absentee fathers, etc.
He pathologized the Black family unit as being like fundamentally flawed and a problem, and the source problem of all of the other indicators of Black family, of Black life in America.
Yeah, and that if they could just figure out how to have a more stable family life, they could have the outcomes that white people have. So a guy named William Ryan wrote a book called Blaming the Victim, which is the other of two books I've ever read, which talks about a phenomenon that is common in social services, especially at that time, which spends a lot of time excoriating Moynihan for this, which, among other things, is not statistically true. At that time, there was no real difference between white and Black families. And also this idea that like every bad thing that the system does to people must be somehow their fault. And this was a perfect example of that. But anyway, that's the kind of like wonderful intellectual thinking we're getting into. Moynihan was a Democrat, by the way.
It's also not particularly scientific because, it's scientific in that he collected sociological data and he had numbers and facts, and then he, I guess, produced the theory. But if your theory manages to ignore all the structural and complicating factors and like the economic situation that is surrounding the families that you're studying, I just don't think that it just doesn't feel like there's very much rigor in that particular science. And there was plenty of people all the time that were pointing this out.
Yeah.
Like it's not like this, we just hadn't discovered how to do responsible sociology.
Yeah. It wasn't like too early in his time. It was.
The Moynihan Report had very real policy impact for decades.
It did. That was the other thing. It was taken very seriously because what at the end of the day, what they needed was an excuse for why they had created a racial caste system in the United States, which intentionally and systematically locked black people into menial labor. They had to have some reason, justification, excuse for why they had been locked into this underclass, and they had to be found outside of the capitalist system. So this was what they came up with.
Yeah. There's remnants of this report in current policies. That's how it's current, like, social policies. That's how impactful the report was. Like the way the social programs handle single family, like female-headed households, the type of benefits they get versus the type of benefits you don't get. For now, a female-headed household, there's like many of the assumptions made about poverty and welfare and how social programs can address them are based on decisions made after this report was published in the 60s.
I mean, it's irksome today to hear about how equality of opportunities, why isn't there equality of outcome? That's annoying in 2025. He wrote this report 2 years after the I Have a Dream speech.
Yep.
So it's willful ignorance. But anyway, that confidence underlaid the explosion of social policy making that helped define the 60s.
So the thing we tore it down, but David Brooks is like, I just wish we still had it.
Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society brought a raft of new programs that aimed to eliminate poverty and inequality. The Nixon administration followed with more in the same vein. At the start of 1960, approximately 250,000 people were on welfare in New York City. At the beginning of 1969, about 900,000 were. Did you just have ChatGPT write this? Can you give me a quick summary of social programs in the 1960s and 70s?
Well, the funny thing is that ChatGPT would be good at writing it because you can convince it. You can kind of get it to write anything convincingly.
Right.
So you can be like, give me a good summary of social programs in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And ChatGPT would be like, gladly, I think this is a real zinger. I can't wait to write this for you.
Yeah. All right. The new programs did not produce the intended results. By the 1970s, the economy was in terrible shape.
That's where the neocons come in.
I guess we're about to find out. Pushed into a recession by the Vietnam War, an oil embargo, and the high cost of Johnson's Great Society.
So maybe he is arguing that the neocons will solve this. But wait a second. Didn't he start with Moynihan?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it makes sense.
It's incoherent so far, but we'll see. I mean, this just so we're clear, there was a terrible economic crisis at the end of the 70s.
Yes.
It was not caused by the Vietnam War, although that certainly didn't help. It was not caused by an oil embargo, and it was not caused by the high cost of Johnson's Great Society. What was it?
Was it overproduction?
It was overproduction.
What is overproduction?
What is overproduction? To some degree, the Great Society was probably attempts to deal with the fact that American society could no longer consume all the products it was producing.
Yes, of course it was.
Yeah, of course it was.
Because you came out of a world war where you didn't actually have overproduction. That was a good amount of production and a good amount of destruction to deal with the production.
Correct.
And then you started to have overproduction problems looming. And one way of dealing with overproduction problems is spending lots of money on social programs.
Welfare, right. Government spending, which had always been the trick since the New Deal to solve this problem, was government spending.
You know who might have a good take on this?
Who?
The Trotskyists in the cafeteria alcove.
They would certainly understand some of this. And they would come to neoconservatism with some understanding of this stuff, which will become, I think, clear as we go through this. The trick that LBJ tried was to basically increase the New Deal as much as possible. Get a lot of people on welfare, pay them not to work, so you could get them consuming without producing extra.
Yep.
But what it ended up doing was, in May 1975, the unemployment rate hit 9%, and a few years later, the inflation rate neared 15%.
Yes.
That's what happens, is inflation,
yes,
when you try to do it this way.
And then they got nailed with it was super inflated oil costs, but the
oil embargo.
There was an embargo.
Yeah.
But how do they get out of it? They don't get out of it by some neocon coming up with a fucking...
They get out of it by...
monetary policy.
Neoliberalism.
Which is not neoconservatism. Well, is he going to try to cut it for that too?
Let's see.
Well, the neocons are basically neoliberal.
Yeah, I mean, aren't they neoliberals, but with extremely hawkish foreign policy? So I thought that's what they were. The productivity rate started to decline in 1973, and the poverty rate ticked upwards. Social measures, too, painted a grim picture. From 1960 to 1980, divorce rates more than doubled. Why did divorce rates more than double between 1960 and 1980? Was it the breakdown of the social fabric?
I think it was that women were allowed to get divorced and have credit cards.
Yeah, that's why.
But
Women were finally allowed to get no-fault divorce.
But let's ask Moynihan, because he was pathologizing women separating from their men very early on.
Yeah, right.
And he thought it had to do with a particular group of people in the United States. So what is his take?
If you're concerned about the divorce rate doubling between 1960 and 1980, the prescription for that is to not allow women to get divorced without permission from their husbands. That's the thing that changed, was that women could finally get away from their fucking husbands if they wanted to.
Yeah, and sign their own credit cards and sign their own mortgages.
Yes, had some economic stability. The share of children born out of wedlock more than tripled. Violent crime rates also more than tripled. Drug use exploded.
What's the reason for the drug use?
Because the CIA flooded the cities with drugs because they wanted to stop the social movements of the 60s and 70s, which is not a conspiracy theory. It's well documented. The public housing projects that had been built with such promise turned into hellscapes.
That's just an empirical fact.
Yeah. But hellscape is actually, you can measure. There's a chart where it goes from cesspool to hellscape. Like cross that.
Tipped right over in 1973.
Yeah. I mean, they made these housing projects. The architecture in them was absolutely atrocious, and they flooded them with drugs.
So. It was designed to make sure it tipped to hellscape real quick. Right. Amazing what you can do with design.
As someone who grew up in New York City in the 70s, I'm astounded by the level of social disorder we all learned to live with.
You know, we should introduce him to Giuliani. He has a prescription for that.
Yeah,
but just arrest all the youth near the subways.
Yeah, I think you arrest anyone who let their window stay broken.
Yeah,
pretty much everyone I knew got mugged.
Okay, David.
That's just because they were annoyed. In 1972 and 1973, there was a serial castrator and killer in Manhattan named Charlie Chopoff. He was never caught, and such was the general chaos that it wasn't even that big a story.
I think Charlie Chopoff has been burnt into David Brooks's memory.
Yeah.
I've heard this story about
Charlie Chopoff?
No, another boomer who lived in New York in the 70s, and how you had to make sure you didn't lock your doors if you left your cigarettes in the car.
Bernie Sanders?
Because they would break the windows to get the cigarette.
Norman Finkelstein. Oh.
Yeah, it was Norman Finkelstein.
Okay.
He said just put the cigarettes on the roof of the car.
Okay. So
you're in a hellscape.
Something to note here, and he doesn't talk about like the counterculture and the political revolution at the time at all.
He's about to in the next paragraph.
Oh, he is. Okay, well that's good. But let's do that, and then we'll talk about this. The neocons were mostly immigrant kids who'd grown up in places like Brooklyn, when the borough was still a haven for working-class New Yorkers.
I don't know.
What he means by that is white people. He means white working-class New Yorkers.
I think he wants to return to this just as much as Mom Downey does. And that's why I think David Brooks will probably be the best deputy there.
He means, when he says working class, a haven for working class New Yorkers, he means before the unemployed black people moved in and chased everyone out.
He means the Trotskyists. That's what he means.
They had seen their families rise out of poverty by embracing the common bourgeois virtues. The common bourgeois virtues,
which are
inherit money, exploit as many people as you can,
own the means of production. What are the bourgeois values?
Control the media.
Let's see what David Brooks can say.
Hard work, thrift, self-reliance, self-discipline, respect for tradition, and an intense focus on education.
Just make shit up.
Hard work, thrift.
So these
are
the values of maybe a laborer, a wage laborer, which are not the bourgeois.
I mean,
but why do any?
So Brooks you would assume that someone was writing about Trotskyists would understand what a bourgeois person is. But let's think about this. I want you to imagine a wealthy capitalist lying on their yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean, and I want you to picture whether these things sound like this person who has servants on the boat and has, a wife and 3 girlfriends, has been to Epstein's Island a few times.
Yeah.
Hard work, thrift.
Nicole Richie is coming to mind. Paris Hilton's coming to mind.
Self-reliance, self-discipline, respect for tradition,
Hilarious.
and an intense focus on education.
I mean, this is the problem with op-ed writers. All right, carry on.
When the counterculture arose in the 60s, the neocons were dismayed to see affluent kids at Berkeley, Harvard, and Columbia dropping out, doing acid, and denouncing the industrious and traditional culture of their parents, and embracing the social anarchy resulting from that culture's erosion.
No, they should have joined a real commune.
I mean, this is just...
Would have been fine.
Sounds like it was written by someone who was extremely uncool in high school in the late 70s. What do you think? The disillusionment of the 60s made neoconservatism bipartisan. The disillusionment of the 60s
Really
made so this is what happened, and this happened in the lead up to the Great Depression, and it happened again in the 70s, which was that capitalism fell into a deep crisis. The political establishment that existed at the time was completely unprepared to deal with it. Could only imagine doing more of the same thing they had been doing, which was no longer working. That was accompanied by general dissatisfaction in the system and the rise of a honest-to-God leftist threat to capitalism. This is what we think of when we think of the union movement in the 20s and 30s, and what we think of as the counterculture civil rights movement, new left movement in the 60s and 70s. And then a big old reactionary movement to save capitalism from the crisis. That's what happened here. The events of the 60s and 70s taught the men and women who would become neocons two big lessons. The first was that drugs are bad. Now, the first was that society is a lot more complicated than it looks, and that many attempts to re-engineer it end up producing no benefits at all, or worse.
Okay.
A 1971 essay by Glazer in Commentary, The Limits of Social Policy, captured the chastened mood. So did Crystal's famous definition of a neoconservative, quote, a liberal who has been mugged by reality. God. So the point of this is that...
Which is quite different than someone who is a Trotskyist. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Oh, so, just have all of as everything collapse into one...
I mean, they're describing Hillary Clinton is what they're describing.
She's a very good neocon.
Yeah. So the point of this is that the Great Society was an attempt to use social policy to help people, and all it did was make everything terrible.
Yes.
And so they needed somebody really wonderful, smart, and savvy to come in, which is what Ronald Reagan.
Well, I guess they needed neoconservative social policy, which he's going to say is, I guess, he's going to try to paint as good, and because he needs some counterweight to the Iraq War.
Those commonly associated with the neoconservative crew were not against trying to use government to relieve poverty or inequality. Moynihan, Glazer, and Bell were not libertarians or even small government conservatives. But their insight was that if you're going to launch a big federal program, you had better acknowledge that most programs, whether job training, education reform, or efforts to reduce juvenile delinquency, fail. You had better have a lot of evidence the idea will work, and you had better proceed cautiously, experimentally, and without building big bureaucracies.
So why both of them fail? Is most of them are not taking into account the structural reasons those things are happening, and they're continuing to uphold the economic conditions that are leading people to be incarcerated, or unable to, complete high school or get a job. And I guarantee you that the neocons aren't the ones that are going to simply solve that problem.
No. They also fail because they're chronically underfunded. They're constantly under attack from outside by people who have no good faith arguments for why they shouldn't exist. They just want the money back. They become hopeless bureaucracies of people who don't really care if the people they're supposed to be giving benefits to receive the benefits, so on and so forth. And all of that is done by dehumanizing the people who are supposed to be getting the benefits, which David Brooks has done his whole career. Given this hard-earned skepticism and epistemological modesty, it is ironic that many later conservatives, including me, who had supped at the neocon table, would come to embrace a grand project to create democracy in Iraq.
That is ironic. I wonder if there's another reason that they were so into that project.
So the Iraq was an aberration, is what this is going to be. They all knew better, but they just... They couldn't help themselves. It wasn't a natural outgrowth of the bullshit they believed.
Who knows where this is going?
I
cannot tell.
In fact, the single most famous neoconservative essay on foreign policy is Jean Kirkpatrick's 1979 article, Dictatorships and Double Standards, also in commentary, in which she explains that laying the groundwork for a democracy where one does not yet exist requires decades of civil society work.
No duh.
Quote, it seems clear that the architects of contemporary American foreign policy have little idea of how to go about encouraging the liberalization of an autocracy, unquote. Somehow, 24 years later, that lesson was forgotten on the way to Iraq. Somehow.
So strange.
So somehow.
How they missed that.
Another important truth the neocons learned from the 60s is that you can't separate policy making from moral character. Meaning, if you're uncool, you have morals. The political scientist James Q. Wilson put it this way in The Public Interest in 1985. The most important change in how one defines the public interest that I have witnessed and experienced over the last 20 years has been a deepening concern for the development of character in the citizenry. They should probably have been looking at the development of character in the political class and the economic elite, but who would mind it? When trying to effect social change, Wilson continued, the essential first step is to acknowledge that at root, in almost every area of important public concern, we are seeking to induce persons to act virtuously. Induce? Whether as school children, applicants for public assistance, would-be lawbreakers, or voters and public officials. I like comparing applicants for public assistance with would-be lawbreakers. There's nothing neocon hates more than a would-be applicant for public assistance. Not only is such conduct desirable in its own right, it appears now to be necessary if large improvements are to be made in those matters we consider problems: schooling, welfare, crime, and public finance. So what, neocons are going to fix all these problems? A bipartisan neocon effort.
Let's see.
When neocons evaluated any policy proposal, the core questions they asked were, does this moralize or demoralize the people it touches? Does this induce them to behave more responsibly or less so? By morality, they didn't mean the kind of fancy notions explored by Thomas Aquinas or Immanuel Kant. No kidding. They just meant the basics. Does this policy encourage people to work hard, be good parents and neighbors, delay gratification, and recognize not just their rights, but their responsibilities?
So I don't know where his evidence is that neocons evaluate policies based on whether it moralizes or demoralizes. I imagine he just made that up as he was writing it. But I do see where he's going.
Yeah. The other question I have to ask is, does a media cottage industry where talking heads who have no popular support at all get funded almost entirely by extremely wealthy people so that their nonsense is constantly in the public sphere, does that moralize people and encourage them to work hard, be good persons, delay gratification, recognize their not just their rights but responsibilities? Because this is the neocon thing was they're not responsible for any of this stuff. They didn't have to win hearts and minds. They didn't have to. They were almost completely not funded by readership, but by wealthy benefactors who wanted this stuff out there. So I don't know this applies to them, I guess, because they're only commenting on what needs to be done to the rabble and sheep, not to them. I mean, Bill Kristol probably has never worked a day in his life, for example. Anyway, neocons like Kristol had no problem with Social Security, which reduced poverty among seniors. Giving seniors money doesn't give them a greater incentive to grow old.
It does, actually. Giving seniors money actually does give them a greater incentive to grow old.
Yeah, to take care of themselves.
To take care of themselves.
To have some view of the future. Can you look up real quick and see what Bill Kristol's opinion on Social Security is? I'm sure it was extremely supportive. Never mentioned cutting it because it had to be cut.
Bill Kristol is known for their critical, skeptical views of large government welfare programs, including Social Security.
Okay. But neoconservatives noticed that the number of single-parent families surged during the war on poverty's expansion of welfare.
Here it is.
Because why?
Because they were incentivizing people
to have kids at wedlock.
And get divorced. And live off the government's milk teat.
I wouldn't have had a kid, but since there's money for it now, a guaranteed income, they argued, reduced labor force participation and the desire to work. I think this is a notable thing about this, which runs through a lot of this, is that people that have no interest in working, they will be as lazy as you let them be.
Yeah.
Which isn't what human nature is like. They certainly don't want to be exploited on the job. So they'll avoid that if they can. But people are almost always working.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess none of these.
Look at a mother or a parent.
Right. Well, that was what I was going to say is none of these guys probably have done very much parenting, but a single mother is working almost all the time.
Yeah.
But that doesn't count.
Any involved parent is working almost all the time for others.
Yeah.
Anyone with aging parents, anyone with a creative hobby or interest is working. Most people who have homes they're trying to upkeep are working all the time.
Yeah. And
but I guess they would say that's because they've been moralized to do so.
But not by income. They do that without any monetary incentive.
Well, I don't think he's suggesting that you give people monetary incentives to be moral.
Well, I guess you take away monetary incentives not to be moral.
Yes.
I see. There's this hysteria about the birth rate, and you think that they would understand that if reproductive labor is valuable, it should be compensated somehow. But there's nothing, I guess, worse than a mother with a kid taking care of that kid.
Well, I think that
they have to be handing that off to a child care person to do it for them.
Doesn't J.D. Vance want to give us money if we have more than 3 kids?
Is that true?
Wasn't that a thing? Trump administration looking to give a $5,000 baby bonus. It doesn't seem like
great. $5,000. That'll pay for diapers for 1 month.
Hey, that's $25,000 for our household. Do we have to have them all at once?
Is it retrospective?
Is it retroactive? I'll have some more. How much more? 10?
Pass.
10,000.
Hard pass. They're gonna have to triple it. All right.
Where were we?
They noticed that when you gave a country permission to rack up a huge financial deficit, you're giving people permission to behave more and more selfishly towards future generations. Okay.
The people's fault. That's the people. Our national deficits are people's fault, not
This is dishonest in the extreme.
Yes.
The federal debt fell as a percentage of GDP since World War II all the way until which president?
I'm going to say George W. Bush.
Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Ronald Reagan.
So he's talking, they're trying to make it seem like the country is spending like crazy on all these poor people, and so they stopped working. But what was really happening was we were coming down off this extremely high period of public spending with World War II.
Indeed.
Public spending which single-handedly saved U.S. capitalism because they had no consumer until the state stepped in to do it for them.
Yes.
And then the government continued to spend, tax and spend. Not deficit, tax and spend.
Yeah.
Right? All the way through the 60s and 70s.
Right.
Then you ended up with a crisis.
Indeed.
And that crisis could no longer be dealt with by tax and spend. So what you had was reduced taxes significantly and deficit spend instead. So you had this explosion of debt, both federal debt and individual debt, in order to support consumption. That was the new stage of capitalism, and that was neoliberalism. So he better not turn around and say that...
he says the neocons are against that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, the neocons hated Reagan. Is that what he's going to say? Is he going to pretend that that's true? Okay, let's see what he says.
Weren't they the neocons, weren't they in Reagan's administration?
Of course they were. And they probably thought it was all the greatest thing that ever happened. Why? Because taxes on rich people went down. That's all that really mattered to them. So neocons put virtue at the center of their public policy thinking. They were not afraid to be moralistic, which is in moral judgment of everyone who is not them.
Yeah.
For not working jobs that none of these people would ever even consider doing. They rejected the privatization of morality. What does that mean?
I don't even know what that means.
Which they saw happening around them, especially in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s.
That might be that people can have their own ideas about things. That it's not like a singular
that you could
Christian
decide for
set of
yourself
values. Yeah.
What was moral. During that hyper-individualistic moment, many Americans valorized the idea that a person's values, tastes, and cultural attitudes are a private affair. Because everyone's moral standards are different, no one should try to impose their morality on everyone else. Live and let live. That idea is still with us.
So it sounds like libertarianism to me.
Yeah. Or like an idea that I thought that was what freedom was, but...
Well, it depends on which column David Brooks is writing.
The neocons, by contrast, believe that humans are social and spiritual creatures whose souls are either ennobled or degraded by the systems, cultures, and behaviors in which we are.
Is any of this true, or is he just making this up?
I don't know. I mean, I've never done a deep study of these people.
I doubt he has either, but carry on, I suppose.
I mean, it's part of his ideological tradition. So I assume he knows what he's talking. I would assume that if he's saying something that's not true, he knows it, but maybe not. We're constantly influencing and being influenced by one another. We're all reliant on a shared pool of moral capital, the values, norms, behaviors, and institutions that make it easier for people to be good. When you privatize morality, you drain the pool of shared moral capital. I mean, so they're communists? I mean, what is it? I mean, in any other context, in any other country, would he support a viewpoint like that?
I mean, I think it's definitely a neocon belief that culture shapes behavior. That's where you get the Moynihan report.
Sure, yeah. So,
and there's definitely a neocon belief, I bet you, that social institutions matter a lot, cultural institutions matter a lot. It's, all of this is kind of a way to obfuscate the economics.
It is.
But I don't know where he's getting this other sort of like the public moral fountain.
I mean,
and how it's been privatized.
Wouldn't he then support like the morality police in Iran, or like the social moral credit system in China? Wouldn't he say that those are things they would support? Yeah.
I mean, I do think that neocons are definitely not libertarians. So they do have a less like individualistic mindset than some of the other people on the right. But I feel like he's doing a lot of notional. I think he's making a fair amount of shit up, but carry on.
The neocons inspected each of society's systems, trying to identify ways they ennobled or degraded people. For example, their support for capitalism was ambivalent because, although capitalism encourages risk-taking and industriousness, good for the economy, it also tends to inflame greed and Philistinism, bad for the soul. Bell's 1976 book, The Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism, noted that although capitalism relies on a far-sighted, self-disciplined people to create value and grow the economy, sure, that's famously, capitalism relies on farsightedness. The advertising and consumerist mentality that capitalism generates encourage short-sightedness and self-indulgence.
That's the contradiction in capitalism we found?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost exactly the opposite, that the supply side people are incredibly short-term thinking, and consumers are much more long-term thinking. But okay. The neoconservatives also paid enormous attention to the mediating institutions of society that successfully transmit ideas from one generation to the next. Families, neighborhoods, congregations, civic organizations. Really shitty magazines funded almost entirely by rich people.
He's identifying true things that shifted culturally, but he's got, I think, both the wrong time frame and the wrong diagnosis. But carry on, David.
The neocons argued that the left, seeing society almost exclusively in terms of the individual and the state, gave short shrift to these valuable institutions.
What? What left does that? Marxists don't think that way.
No, they sure don't.
If he's talking about neoliberals, maybe. If he's talking about liberals, maybe.
Liberals don't think... I mean, I thought liberals were obsessed with institutions, civic society institutions. So what?
So he's talking about libertarians. I mean, not any freaking person on the left, a true leftist, is like, it's really about me and the state. It's not about. It's about your class membership creating a state.
Yeah.
I think this is
all of this
deliberately misleading, so the reader can read it and be like, "Huh, interesting idea," and then.
Yeah. It's like, oh, the neocons were the only ones who cared about morality and civil society. Everyone else was only worried about individuals and their own little sort of internal world, which is just nonsense. I mean, the 60s and 70s were all about like changing all kinds of institutions.
Yes.
I mean, did the civil rights movement just go to like government buildings? I mean, they were doing restaurants and buses and all this other stuff.
Yeah. He's also identifying the decline of traditional institutions from which people understood their identities and values happened, but it wasn't championed by liberals or leftists. It was just a result of like industrialization, really.
Yeah.
And material conditions in particular Western countries, and propped up by capitalism and like capitalist government projects.
That's right.
So I don't. I mean, this is either he's dumb or he's lying.
I mean, it might be both, but you know, all the family stuff broke down because the social forms that like had made sense in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s,
or
and 50s.
during feudalism, with
Well,
it really mattered.
Nothing ever changed.
Right.
Things had changed dramatically between 1950 and 1970, and all those boomer kids rejected all that stuff because the world was completely different than the one that nuclear family was made for. And
Well, the world was completely different than what the traditional longer-term lineage families were made for.
right. And people started to look for, if we want to talk about things like postmodernism and so on, like you have these social forms break down because they no longer fit into a world that production and thinking and science has advanced way past when those things made sense anymore. So you had people, he's describing people's like own thing, but what that own thing was people trying to figure out what was true anymore because they realized that religion is not true. All these virtues that they've been told are built into the universe are not built into the universe. They were served a function, right? They were pragmatic to force people to do things against their interests. So they went on a search looking for what made sense to them, and a lot of them ended up on the left and said, what makes sense to me is fighting for the good of the collective, humanism, things like this. And this seems to be a reaction to that of the worst possible type, which is, it was pragmatic, but that's why it exists, because you rabble can't be trusted to think for yourselves.
So
it's not true. It just serves a purpose, which is to get you to do what we need you to do.
So it seems like he's suggesting that neocons have this really nice litmus test where they can decide whether something's moral or not. And what they're really looking at is, does the thing make you want to work?
Right.
And does the thing make you a good cog in the system?
Right.
And that's all been degraded, and we need to return to that, because if we don't have cogs, we have a problem.
Right. We don't have a nation which can act in the interests of an elite, which needs that nation to do things like be able to successfully extract resources from around the world, to have a huge GDP.
It's very dumb to think you can just return to these old traditional ways to force values upon people, though. You can't just be like, oh, let's go back to when, if your dad said you had to do it, if your dad was a cobbler, you were a cobbler.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the neocons aren't going to like magically create social policy that brings that kind of thinking back. So what are they going to do? Like, socially engineer it?
That's right. They understand that people will no longer believe this stuff as they did believe it was true about the world. So now it needs to be imposed through social engineering. Like, you're not going to use the church to convince people.
Great.
You're going to punish them for not behaving.
I look forward to hearing what social engineering he thinks has been effective. A, I'm against that as an idea, but B, does he even have an example?
Yeah, so let's see. Because neocons saw them as seed beds of character and as cultural shock absorbers for when times get hard, they were concerned that the expansion of the state seemed to be weakening and displacing these institutions. So they want a smaller government. Though many neocons were not religious themselves, they were alarmed by the decline of religion and congregational life.
Get those poor people back to church.
Right. Right.
I'm too enlightened and important to be bothered with this congregational life.
Real people are smart enough not to be taken in by this dumb shit, but our pawns need to be going. They were alarmed too by the policy of deinstitutionalization, which took mentally ill people out of mental health facilities, put them on the street, and called it freedom.
What a strange one to drop in there.
It's a Reagan policy. So are they going to be against Reagan in this? Is that this? I mean, so small government, but also put all the mentally ill people into, you know what these places look like?
Yes, I am aware. There's an
I'm
option.
not going to describe it, but people should look if you're curious.
Between putting them on the streets and keeping them in horrifying conditions.
Right.
Those are not the only two choices.
Right. But those are the only two choices if you don't consider them human beings.
Well, this is a weird example to drop in there, because what he's trying to say is that this is bad. He's trying to figure out an example that helps you be like, oh my God, it's bad for the whole of society, and they're doing it anyways. And he's doing it on the backs of mentally ill people or just children who are developmentally different and kept like in prisons their entire lives. But yeah, it's sick, David Brooks.
Yeah, here we go. This kind of approach, neocons argued, was hopelessly hyper-individualized, placing the, quote, freedom of the individual before the safety of the community. That's it. It was a public hazard. They needed to be locked away and, thrown into a big
It's a practical and utilitarian decision. We just have to lock them away.
Yeah. There's no other option like taking good care of them or
connecting them to communities.
or like maintaining their freedom and public safety at the same time.
Or like using science to decide what they actually need to be taken care of, because like not just lumping anyone who's slightly different into the same boat and throwing the key away.
Throwing them away, yeah.
But go on, neocons.
The neocons also paid enormous attention to the prevailing ethos of their time, what we might call the spirit of the age.
The zeitgeist, if
What
you
was
will.
what was the spirit of the
Tell
age?
me more.
They believe that this ethos was not driven primarily by economic and political forces, but shaped by shifts in culture and ideas. Oh, so they're not taken by an ethos. They're taken by the idea that there is an ethos that you must discover, I guess, in order to manipulate people to behave the way you want.
Sure.
Quote, individuals, families, churches, and communities cannot operate in isolation, cannot maintain values at odds with those legitimized by the state and popularized by the culture, Gertrude Himmelfarb, a neoconservative historian, wrote in The Public Interest in 1994. So, if the wider assumptions of society are shaped by hyper-individualism,
Antinomianism.
Antinomianism? The fuck is that? Have you heard that word before?
No.
Antinomianism?
The theological belief, often in Christianity, that divine grace through faith frees believers from the obligation to follow moral laws.
Oh my God. This is how you know he's a fucking dork about this stuff.
Sin.
License to sin. Okay. And as Christopher Lasch put it, a culture of narcissism, then society is likely to deteriorate. Right. You have to see yourself as part of a bigger whole.
I completely
And that whole is not for the betterment of the collective, it's for the betterment of the nation.
Hyper-individualism is a problem in the United States and in the West.
Yeah. And they were right to see that capitalism was the thing driving it, because they needed a consumer base that saw itself as the center of the universe.
Yes, but forcing the poor schmucks back to church is not going to solve here.
This is all. I mean, it is neoconservative is right. It's a reactionary movement they said we need to go back to the 1920s when kids were working in factories and parents had absolutely no expectations for their lives whatsoever, except for working their entire lives on dime.
Yeah, and you'd have 10 children because 3 of them would die.
Yep.
And you'd live until you were 45, maybe.
And you would think of all of that as a good thing to have done because the church made you believe you were being moral by doing that.
Well, it's a good thing to have done because you're pretty sure you're going to get to go live forever in the kingdom of God.
Yeah, and not ever have
you're
to work.
Passing through.
I mean, do you think they have problems with people being moral in the kingdom of God? Because no one has to work hard in the kingdom of God. They must all be demoralized all the time. That must be
where they apply their antinomianism. They all have the license to sin up there.
Yeah. One of Moynihan's famous essays published in the American Scholar in 1993 was, quote, Defining Deviancy Down, which theorized that as the amount of deviant behavior in a community rises, people tend to define behavior that was once considered deviant as normal and acceptable. I guess he's talking about the Epstein class, right?
Yeah, right. So a couple notes. These guys love an alliteration in their titles. I feel like if we go and look at all these magazines they're talking about and we go back through all the titles, I'm pretty sure every single one was alliterative. And I just think that's a really interesting virtue of the neocon class. I also, clearly, what he's talking about, Moynihan's talking about here, is gay and lesbian people and transgender people. And it's the same playbook. I mean, Moynihan, I guess, doesn't have that many notes. Culture defines behavior. So if something starts to happen more and more often, it's because the culture has degraded. There's something wrong with the culture. To pathologize the culture or the family unit that's causing the symptom. Mm-hmm. And so if you start to see more gay people in community and that becomes normalized, it's not because there's greater tolerance in the community or people are able to finally express themselves in a more diverse and affirming way. It's because the actual social fabric is degrading.
Yeah. And people have deluded themselves into thinking this is normal. When
it's normalized deviance.
Right.
And where do you find normal? I guess you look it up in the Bible. Oh wait.
Right.
Yeah.
Where
that's what I was wondering. Come from?
That's exactly what I was wondering. Is we just to decide what's deviant. Moynihan does. I thought the spirit of the age did, but I guess if the spirit of the age is tolerance for people's private sexual decisions, that's
no. The spirit of the age doesn't define anything. You just have to pay attention to the spirit of the age.
Okay, it never defines it. So the spirit of age may be deviancy, but you have to pay attention to that.
Now, I guess there's some age in which the spirit of the age is non-deviancy, and that's what you're trying to anchor against. But we've yet to figure out which that one is. I don't know. You ask Trotsky if Trotsky likes it, it's good.
My God, I assume that this was broken window theory again, but you're right. It is absolutely about homosexuality, and that is so fucking annoying. That makes me so fucking mad that he took the time to do that. You don't have anything else to worry about?
No.
Oh my God, there are some people who have been convinced, have been tricked, the higher incidence of homosexuality, that this is okay.
Yep.
If everyone was gay in the world, it would still be deviant.
Right, because there's some a priori answer that tells you what's good and bad. And I guess you just know it if you're, I don't know, a 75-year-old white guy.
Yeah.
Who has had government positions.
Who's never given occasion ever to consider where his own ethical mores came from. They must have come from on high, right? They couldn't have been a product of the spirit of his age, which he was acculturated. It had to come from somewhere universal that only he has access to. He who knows better than going to church.
He's just right.
While old-fashioned conservatives cited Edmund Burke and libertarians cited Adam Smith, neocons never tired of quoting Alexis de Tocqueville. He shaped how they saw society, a single civilization in which politics and culture, economics and morality, democracy and spirituality were all fundamentally inseparable. Who is this person?
He's a philosopher on democracy and modernism. Tyranny of the majority, aristocrat who wrote about democracy in America. He gets cited by conservatives because of his importance of mediating institutions and the fear of moral decay and the tyranny of the majority. Liberals cite him because he's all about democracy, civil society, education. He was negative on individualism. Democratic equality makes people withdraw into private life. Everyone focuses on their own family. Erodes civic participation and solidarity, creates atomization and loneliness. Civil institutions like churches and local government are crucial for democracy. They stand between the individual and the state. They teach civic virtue.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he's got a mix of things he's talking about. I think they listen. I think neocons cherry pick, but
sure. This is an element that has been woven into American society since they had to take back what they said in the direct Declaration of Independence to write the Constitution, which is terror of democracy, absolute terror that the majority of people who do not benefit from the system will realize that, and they will have their way with the minority, which has been exploited.
We have to have various controls in place to deal with that. Electoral controls, mediating institutions.
Yeah. All these
control
things,
the masses.
All this artifice to make sure that people continue to behave themselves in such a way that allows them to be exploited.
Well, let's see how David Brooks characterized it.
The spirit of civilization shapes who people are, how they perceive reality, and what they think is right and wrong. In every endeavor, the crucial question is, how are people being deceived by institutions? What sort of people are we nurturing into being?
Or who's we here? The great men of...
Yeah, no, the important people who get...
How are we shaping... How are we molding the poor people to make sure they show up to work on time and don't actually understand how democracy could work?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of elitism that people accuse communists of being.
This is also the kind of elitism that is really not that anyone in MAGA is reading The Atlantic. But should they read this and get through this, I don't suggest you read it, MAGA, because it's really annoying to read. But if you were able to get through it and all these bizarre name drops he's got here, you'd realize that it's exactly the elitism you detest. I guess that's why he thinks the neocons need to take back over, because he wants all those MAGA people to be with their butts in the pews and to be like, oh, whatever David Brooks thinks is best, I shall do.
Yeah, I mean, this is like an anti-populist. I guess he's trying to put his hat in the ring and say, neoliberalism is one version of an anti-populist politic. But don't neglect the neoconservatives. They've got a lot to say about being anti-populist. The neoconservatives believe that they were living amid a crisis of values. Not a clash between two different value systems, but a crisis in the very idea of value. So
Okay.
No, it's not a value to like love your neighbor, to accept people who how they were. That's the degradation of value. Value is being able to sort people into good people and bad people based upon whether they are productive in the way that is helpful for, I guess, these men of leisure to hang out and comment on it.
At the time. And if it's different a couple generations later, then it's different categories.
Yeah. Seduced by social science rationalism, moral relativism, or political partisanship, people had trouble thinking clearly about what separates a morally healthy society from a morally unhealthy one. Like what? Jim Crow?
I have no idea.
A morally healthy society, like dropping the bombs in Hiroshima.
I don't know what morally healthy society. I mean, he hasn't actually made that many claims about what he thinks is moral and not moral, other than work hard, be nice to your neighbors. Like, I mean, he really is not. This is a lot of talking about how they organize around morals, and not a lot of clarity on where those come from, which ones are best. But
I mean, to listen to this, you'd think that the civil rights movement and like the new left movement was like, morals are bad. We need to stop having all of that was a righteous condemnation of the horrific immorality of the system up to that point. It wasn't an amoral political movement. None of that was. There was no one talking about what a morally healthy society looks like. That wasn't what Martin Luther King was doing, was talking about what a morally healthy society looks like.
It sure was.
This created a void in the soul of society and engendered a sense of alienation. Yeah, that's what did it. Quote, secular rationalism has been unable to produce a compelling, self-justifying moral code, Crystal said in 1991.
But communism's got a good one.
Yeah, and that's good enough for us because it doesn't matter what we do, but everyone else needs to be compelled.
Yeah.
The result is nihilism, an amoral culture in which people grow up without coherent values.
It's gross. It's very Moynihan.
Yeah. Marx talked at length about the destruction of capitalism's destruction of traditional values. And all these people would have been aware of that as Trotskyists. But
I mean, you can't say alienation without understanding the Marxist take on it. So they are completely aware.
Right.
So
how can neoconservative thinking help us today? I think probably by sending us to war in a country that we have no business being in. The first big lesson of neoconservatism is that character is destiny. That lesson applies whether you're talking about the character of a leader, an organization, or a nation. If you disregard truth, as many Republicans plainly do these days, you will wind up in some pretty ugly places.
Oh, catching strays out there, Trump.
Yeah.
Your character is your destiny.
For example, they might do something like push a narrative of weapons of mass destruction in order to push a country to war. That kind of like disregard for the truth.
Yeah.
If you want to improve the character of a nation or an organization, you have to change its culture so that it nurtures basic decency.
Sure. I agree.
Which you have the right to do if you're these people. Which leads to the second lesson.
I mean, if this is an argument that leadership matters, I would agree. And if it's a leadership that you should make sure that you're building systems and cultures and groups that nurture basic decency, I also agree.
Yeah. Those are all not by people who believe any of it, but people who push it because they pragmatically want an outcome.
I know. But the way he wrote his first lesson, I agree.
Which leads to the second lesson of neoconservatism.
Here comes the second lesson.
The most important values in a democratic society are the pedestrian bourgeois virtues.
Have you ever seen those three words together?
Nope. Aristocratic societies may do better at inspiring heroism, genius, love of honor. But democratic societies rely on showing up on time, working hard, being there for your neighbor, listening with curiosity, and respecting traditions.
You see that sleight of hand where it was bourgeois virtues is the category.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's democratic societies have these things. So our democratic societies are marked by these traits. These traits, according to Brooks, are bourgeois virtues because democratic societies and bourgeois virtues go together. Which there's no coherence to that whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, he says pedestrian bourgeois values because he wants us to think of bourgeois values, but
as like the everyday man.
Right. Which is not what they are. I mean, bourgeois virtues are you only can rely on yourself. Competition. If you win a competition, that means that you are right. So might makes right. The victor is always correct. that selfishness and greed leads to the best outcomes for everyone.
Which would lead to individualism and atomization.
Right. I mean, what bourgeois values is he talking about? I mean, these are people who are...
He's saying he's making up a category called pedestrian bourgeois virtues to push ideas, Protestant work ethic ideas, as positive and also bourgeois because people think that sounds good, to say that that's how you get democracy. Because what it really gets you, if you're David Brooks, is a group of people that are willing to be exploited.
Yeah, a willing, compliant working class.
And it's really like he sat there and wrote this and knew. I mean, had to have known all the ridiculous sleight of hand in here.
The third crucial insight from the neoconservatives is that culture drives history.
Culture.
There's no way there's a single neocon conservative that thought that culture drives history.
Well, they do seem to.
They're not wrong, are they?
Yeah.
They said economics drives culture that drives history. They saw that and they said, no. We have to be a way to save this thing because we know the economics are going to drive people towards a culture which is threatening the system.
Yeah.
So there has to be a way to save it. And the way to save it is if we can manipulate culture enough.
Yeah.
That's what they decided.
That's why the Moynihan report resists, does extra work to make sure there's not an economic analysis. Everything is culture, which is it is a way to blame individuals, but it's also a way to blame. You can blame cultural institutions. You can blame these sort of immaterial, spirit of the age things.
Yeah, I mean it's a way to try and counteract the ways that a market system destroys itself. Is what it does,
and it's a way
people's
to
consciousness.
A way to avoid a materialist analysis.
Yeah. I mean, or it's based on a material analysis that they understand very well, but they're so desperate to avoid the inevitable outcome of that material analysis that they want an intervention. They want it
they make a detour,
a prophylactic,
yeah,
to prevent what's coming, and that
they want that.
Do that.
Yeah. And I think they want a detour in the conversations and the academy and the theory. They're like, detour culture. Seriously.
Yeah.
Don't look over there. Don't look at the base. Look at the superstructure.
Yeah. The assumptions people rely on, the mental categories in their heads, the things they admire and disdain, the way they process the world, their norms and habits, all of this will determine how they behave. So if you control those things, you can control how they behave.
Controls behavior.
But perhaps the most important belief that the neoconservatives can impart to us is that the American dream is real. Whether it's true or not, they can impart that belief.
They will help.
The original neocons, the sons and daughters of immigrants, aspire to make it in America and contribute to their adopted home.
Okay.
Yeah, what a contribution. If libertarians oriented their politics around freedom and progressives oriented their politics around equality, the neocons tended to orient theirs around social mobility. They wanted to create a world in which poor boys and girls like themselves could rise and succeed. They understood that this ascent required not just economic opportunity, but also the right values.
Yes, unless you were developmentally delayed.
And then into the sanitarium you go. Today, roughly 70% of Americans say they don't believe in the American dream.
Huh, that's so strange.
It must be the culture, right? It couldn't be the economics catching up with itself. It has to be the culture, right?
It's the spirit of the age.
The loss of faith is like a giant bomb detonated in the middle of our society, robbing us of our central unifying vision.
It's like when you have science and you realize that certain traditional ancestral ideas about the sun aren't true anymore. Right. It really blows up mere meaning. It doesn't mean that the sun is,
the perfect example, because what happens is all of those things in the Bible that we know are literally impossible become metaphors. Mm-hmm. They become things you're supposed to believe metaphorically instead of literally. And that's what the neocons want, is they want you to believe in the American dream metaphorically as opposed to actually.
Not for you,
right? Just
as an idea.
Just as an idea that you decide to believe of your own volition in order to discipline yourself so that it can exist as a moral good in the universe.
Exactly.
Not for you.
That's right.
Absent that shared vision of possibility, people revert to tribal us versus them morality. Right. Yes. Us, everyone, them, the 1% of people taking everything. Gotta avoid that at all costs.
Oh yeah. And traditional ideas and religious institutions never led to us versus them morality.
Right.
That's never happened. Now, not a single time.
that Moynihan report was called The Breakdown of the American Family, right?
Right.
They wasn't singling out a specific group or anything.
Yeah, and that Christian theologians weren't like a big part of the rise of Nazi Germany.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, Martin Luther King was against Jim Crow. Like, what are the traditional things that they're bringing back? If the ghosts of the original neocons have anything to tell us about specific policy choices, it's that we need to do what we can to expand social mobility and restore faith in the American dream. Not restore the American dream, restore faith in the American dream.
I mean, I'm still waiting for a single actual policy example that represents what these ghosts of the neocons contributed.
Yeah.
A single one.
Apparently they were only commenting on American society this whole time. They never had a chance to do anything. They never were involved in government. They never got a policy passed. They never fixed anything. They were simply there waiting on the wings, watching what was going on.
That's such a shame, because I would have wanted better social mobility for them. If only they had been in charge at all.
The other thing that the ghosts of the neocons would tell us is that the fight for the American dream is as much moral as political or economic. When he was running for president in 2020, Joe Biden was right to say that the election was a struggle for the soul of America. The problem was that neither he nor the people in his administration knew how to wage a moral and cultural battle. Trump, in contrast, is a genius at cultural warfare. Because of their history going back to the New Deal, Democrats are more comfortable talking about expanding health insurance, investing in infrastructure, and reducing prescription drug prices. One might say that those are all moral priorities, but
they do seem like it.
All of that is important, but they will continually lose to MAGA's cultural warriors unless they can connect those policies to a story about reversing America's moral decline. This is where a new and repurposed neoconservatism can help.
All of those, like New Deal policies and pushing some of these liberal progressive policies, is not without culture. It's frustrating that they're losing because there's a void. It's like all of these things, there's no void.
There's no void. There's an impression of a void because the democratic moral framework is so default since 1980. It's such the American default that it appears to be
a void
because it doesn't press against any of the established moral pillars.
It is also flailing and a failure. So the populist's reaction to it seems to have more energy than the default. But the neocons are have been part of that default,
right?
Also,
exactly.
So he's just trying to distance them.
Yeah, and the one area where there you could say there was some sort of moral framework was wokeism,
right?
Which he would out and out reject.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much a void as the wrong morals, I guess, in his perspective. But that,
No, I'm sure he would be willing to say the wrong morals. But again, I think the premise of the argument is sick. I do think it's correct that neocons are culture people. I think, though, that to write a whole piece about neocons and not identify where they get their sense of where morality comes from for them, how it might be established. But if there was a new breed of neocons tomorrow that were trying to take over, where would they get right and wrong from? And also to not have mentioned a single policy that reflects what he's considering to be the neocon framework that is so good for the concept of the American dream. It's so intellectually dishonest.
It is. It's incredibly.
And I can see exactly who's reading it. Who's reading this are centrist liberals who are like, wow, never thought of it that way. Maybe I'll go into work tomorrow and have some sort of rehabilitation comment about neocons. And they will. They will.
I mean,
what are your closing remarks?
David Brooks, I think you should lead by example. Stop writing these articles. Get a real job. And do like a TV show where they film you all day showing these values in practice you think everyone else should be doing. Work hard, take care of your neighbor, show up on time, work hard, listen with curiosity, and respect tradition. I think you should vlog it. But get a job at the post office, get a job at one of Trump's new factories, and show people by example. That's the best. No one cares what you write in the Atlantic. None of the people that should read this, these are all the people that should be commenting on this stuff anyway. None of these are working class people who need to be told how to behave. So the only way to reach them is to go on TikTok and show them.
David Brooks Hashtag trad life.
Yes.
Hashtag 9 to 5.
Yeah. I want you to work. I want you to work for minimum wage. I want you to have coal smear on your face. I want the minors in your family to be right there with you working.
The minors or the minors?
The
minor minors.
Yeah, I mean, this is all talk until I see you do it. So, and that would be good for you. Not just good for society, but good for you, because we don't want you to be demoralized by living this academic frou-frou life that you're living that doesn't have real deadlines and isn't filled with hard work.
I don't want them demoralized, that's for sure.
Yeah, I want you to be moralized by having a real job and doing it every day. And the best part is we wouldn't have to listen to the dumb shit that you write.
Well, we're doing that to ourselves.
I guess. We're doing it to you.
We climbed over a paywall to get to this one.
Dear listener, we've, yeah.
Your powers will fade.
All right.
As you
Done and
grow
dusted.
old. Your powers will fade as you grow old. Your powers will fade as you grow old. Your powers will fade as you grow old. You're on the make and you don't do regret. You're always out for what you can get. You think like a snake and you ooze like a snail. Let the trail go cold as you swallow your tail. With your low rent skills and your heart of flint, telling your tales that are unfit to print. You're all weasel words, backed up by the boots, obsessed like the rest, with a promise of loot. Your pies will fade as you grow old. 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 You demanded the sea, it obey your commands. You grab at the land with both of your hands. But candles will burn and time will reveal all that you've done and the money you steal. The suffering you're causing gives you no pause for thought. You've got your claws in the dead summer's heart. Birds will return as the birds always do. When they come home to roost, they'll feast on you. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old.
We parked in 15-minute parking. So I was like, this is perfect. I'm going to go in and get the one thing we need from Barnes & Noble and we'll leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in and the line was at least 35 people long.
That's fucking insane.
And there were 2 registers.
It was crazy.
And the good news is they didn't have the thing.
So you didn't have to wait in the line.
We looked and the kids looked and I'm like, it's not there.
Oh, well.
Oh, we have to go or they're going to tow the car. And they go, I want to get towed. I'm like,
no, you don't. No, you don't.
But yeah, I can't imagine what Okay, all right then. Dog.
You tear down the house. You
I do like
start
the
up the
song.
wreck.